Picture two people. Same city, same apartment complex, different floors. The first person lives on the third floor. She makes $52,000 a year. She has about $10,000 in savings right now. She drives a used Honda Civic, paid off 2 years ago. Her apartment is simple. Clean furniture, a mid-sized TV she bought refurbished. She sleeps well at night. The second person lives on the sixth floor. He also makes $52,000 a year. He also has around $10,000 saved, almost identical on paper. But his apartment tells a different story. A $3,800 sectional sofa, a 75-inch television he's still financing, a leased BMW downstairs costing him $540 every single month. He checks his bank account on Sunday nights and feels a knot in his stomach. Same income, similar savings, completely different financial lives. Here's the strange part. If you asked either of them what was different, neither could fully explain it. She might say she's just careful. He might say he's going through a rough patch, a temporary thing. It won't be temporary, because what separates them has nothing to do with income, nothing to do with luck. If you've ever checked your bank account and felt worse than the numbers said you should feel, this video is going to show you exactly why that happens. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Why does someone with $10,000 in the bank still feel broke? That's the question I keep coming back to, the one that actually bothers me. My name is Ricky. I used to work with someone who made more money than anyone else in our office, noticeably more, and he was the most financially stressed person I'd ever been around. That stuck with me for years. It's basically why I started making these videos. Now, here's what I think is actually going on. Having $10,000 saved is good. I mean that. Most Americans don't have $1,000 set aside for an emergency. So if you've built up real savings, that actually matters. But savings is not the same thing as financial security. Those are two completely different things, and most people treat them like they're identical. Security isn't about what's sitting in your account. Security is about the gap between what your life costs to run every single month and what you actually control. Your savings number tells you what you've accumulated. Your gap tells you how long you can actually survive, how much breathing room you have, how much real pressure you're under. Think about it this way. Person A has $10,000 saved. Her life costs $2,200 a month to run. Rent, food, car, utilities, the basics. That $10,000 gives her roughly 4.5 months of real security. Person B also has $10,000 saved, but his life costs $4,800 a month to run. Same savings. His $10,000 gives him barely 2 months, maybe. Same number, completely different reality. Now here's the part that actually matters. Most people in person B's situation don't know their number is $4,800. They have a rough feeling, a vague sense, but they've never clearly added it all up. Because if they did, it would be hard to look at. That's why the feeling never goes away. Not because they're failing, but because they're measuring the wrong thing entirely. Your savings balance is not your security. Your gap is your security. That's the whole idea, and every rule I'm about to walk you through is built on top of that one concept. If this is already clicking, go ahead and subscribe and give it a thumbs up. It helps the channel more than you'd think. Here's the first reason it happens, and once you see it, you'll recognize it everywhere. Rule number 1. I call this the floor trap. Here's how it works. Every time your income goes up, something almost automatic happens, something most people never notice while it's occurring. Your floor rises. You get a raise, so you move into a nicer apartment. Makes sense. You're earning more, a better place feels earned. Then your car feels a little old compared to the new neighborhood, so you upgrade. Then the wardrobe, the phone, the gym. Each step feels like natural progression, like living appropriately for your income level. But here's what's actually happening underneath all of that. Every upgrade permanently raises the minimum cost of your life. That old apartment at $900 a month? Gone. Now you need $1,400 just to stay housed. The paid-off car? Gone. Now you need $420 a month just to stay mobile. These aren't expenses you chose once. They're expenses you locked in every single month going forward.
This is the floor trap. Income goes up, the floor rises to meet it, and your actual margin, the money left over to build real security, stays almost exactly the same. Sometimes it gets smaller. Let me put a real number on this. Say you got a raise from $48,000 a year to $58,000 a year. That's roughly $830 more before taxes. After taxes, closer to $580 extra. But if your rent went up $300, your car payment added $350, and you picked up a gym membership and 2 new subscriptions, you just absorbed your entire raise, and then some. Your savings account didn't move, but your floor went up permanently. And here's what makes this so hard to catch. It doesn't feel like a trap while it's happening. It feels like progress. The counter principle is every income increase should raise your gap before it raises your floor, not the other way around. When more money comes in, the first question isn't what can I afford now? The first question is how much wider does my gap get if I change nothing? So here's the one concrete thing to do with this. Before your next raise hits, decide what percentage goes directly to savings or investments. Pick that number before the money arrives, because once lifestyle inflation has already made the decision for you, it's almost impossible to walk it back. The gap is where security lives, not in the bigger apartment, not in the nicer car, in the gap. Rule number 2, the invisible subscription drain. Look, I know what you're thinking. Subscriptions, $15 here, $12 there. But stay with me, because the actual math on this one is alarming. Most people with $10,000 saved and a paycheck-to-paycheck feeling have somewhere between $200 and $400 leaving their account every single month in subscriptions alone. Not rent, not groceries, subscriptions. Streaming, cloud storage, music, fitness apps, software, meal kits from a free trial they forgot to cancel 2 years ago. Each one, individually, painless, almost invisible. Together, they're a car payment. Here's the number that usually stops people cold. $300 a month in subscriptions is $3,600 a year. Invested instead at a modest 8% return over 20 years, that's over $178,000. From stuff you barely use, stuff you probably forgot you were paying for. That number deserves a moment. Now here's the psychological piece, and this is actually the part that matters most. Subscriptions are designed to be forgettable. That is not an accident. The entire business model depends on low engagement and high retention. Easy to sign up, slightly inconvenient to cancel. Charged on different days so no single statement looks alarming. They are engineered to stay under your awareness threshold. So it's not that you're careless. The system is specifically built to be hard to see. Here's the counter principle. Every dollar leaving your account automatically without requiring a decision from you deserves a review at least once a year. Not because every subscription is bad. Some are actually worth the money. But because automatic payments are where money goes to disappear quietly. Pull up your bank statement this week. Add up every single recurring charge. Most people who do this find between $80 and $200 in charges they either forgot about completely or wouldn't consciously choose to keep if asked directly. And here's the part I find most satisfying about this. The same invisibility that's been working against you, it can work for you. Cancel $150 you weren't using. Redirect it automatically to a high-yield account. Set it and forget it the same way you forgot about those subscriptions. Now the forgetting is building something instead of draining something. The mechanism is identical. The direction is completely different.
Rule number 3, the savings account illusion. Having money in a savings account feels like security. Genuinely. You see the balance, it looks stable, it feels like a cushion between you and disaster. But a savings account sitting still is actually losing ground every single year. Inflation runs around 3% annually. A standard savings account at a big bank pays somewhere between 0.01% and 0.5%. Your $10,000 earns maybe $50 a year in interest, but inflation quietly reduces what that same $10,000 can actually buy by roughly $300 a year. The number looks the same. The security it represents gets smaller. Over 10 years, $10,000 in a standard savings account, adjusted for real purchasing power, is worth closer to $7,400. You lost $2,600 without spending a single dollar. That's the illusion. The balance held steady. The value didn't. Here's the practical fix. Your emergency fund belongs in a high-yield savings account, not a standard one. Right now, those accounts are offering significantly more than a standard savings account, often 10 to 20 times the rate. Whatever the current number is when you're watching this, the gap between standard and high yield is almost always dramatic. Search best high-yield savings accounts, and you'll find current options in about 30 seconds. But here's something most people don't talk about, and honestly, I think it's more interesting than the interest rate itself. Keep your high-yield account at a separate bank from your checking, not the same app, not one tap away. That small amount of friction, the fact that a transfer takes a day or two, is not an inconvenience, it's actually a feature. The biggest threat to an emergency fund isn't inflation, it's convincing yourself that something is an emergency when it isn't. A flight deal, a furniture sale, a weekend trip you didn't plan for. When the money's one tap away, those things start feeling like emergencies. When there's a small delay, you get time to think. And most of the time, when you sit with it for 48 hours, it stops feeling urgent. The friction protects the account. That's a design choice worth making intentionally. Rule number 4, the income identity trap. This is the one people push back on most, and it's usually the one that hits closest to home. Here's what happens when someone starts earning real money for the first time. The income becomes part of their identity. Earning $65,000 a year stops being just what you make, it starts feeling like who you are. It shapes where you live, what you drive, what you wear, where you feel comfortable eating on a Friday night. The income level sets a social standard, and that standard has a cost. Here's the trap. When your income dips, even temporarily, your identity doesn't dip with it. And that gap between who you feel like and what's actually coming in gets filled with credit cards, with savings you have to dip into, with a quiet financial stress that never quite goes away even after the income returns. Let me give you a real example. Someone gets laid off for 4 months. They find a new job, same income, maybe slightly better. On paper, they recovered completely. But during those 4 months, they spent $8,000 from savings to maintain the same lifestyle, because cutting back felt like admitting something, like losing a version of themselves. Now they're back to earning well, but their savings took a serious hit. Their floor never dropped, and they're rebuilding from a weaker position than before the layoff. That pattern, repeated 2 or 3 times across a career, is how smart, hard-working people stay stuck indefinitely. Here's the counter principle. Your spending should reflect your actual current financial position, not the income level you identify with. This isn't about deprivation, it's about flexibility. The people who build real wealth aren't always the highest earners. They're the ones whose spending identity can flex, who can pull back without it feeling like failure, who see a temporary reduction as strategy, not shame. The ability to decouple your self-worth from your spending level. That one skill changes everything. Rule number 5. This one ties everything together. There are really only 2 financial cycles most people live inside, and almost everyone is in one or the other without realizing which one. The first is the pressure cycle. Income comes in, the floor is high, subscriptions drain quietly, savings sit in an account losing ground to inflation. When something unexpected happens, savings take a hit. The floor doesn't drop because identity won't let it. Recovery is slow, then something else happens. Always running, always recovering, always 1 or 2 bad months from real fear. The second is the breathing cycle. Income comes in, the floor is intentionally kept lower than the income. The gap is wide. When something unexpected happens, it gets absorbed. Not recovered from, just absorbed. Here's what that actually feels like in real life. You get a $1,200 car repair on a random Tuesday. Your first reaction is mild inconvenience, maybe a little annoyance, but not panic, not a Sunday night knot in the stomach, not a scramble to figure out which bill to delay, just mild inconvenience. That's what a wide gap feels like. That's the breathing cycle in one single moment. And because you're not in recovery mode, you can invest consistently. That investing compounds, and the compounding eventually reaches a point where the money is generating real money on its own. Now, here's what most people miss about these two cycles. They are self-reinforcing. Financial stress actually impairs decision-making. There's real research on this. When people are under money pressure, cognitive bandwidth narrows, short-term thinking takes over, long-term planning feels abstract and unimportant. The pressure cycle keeps you in the pressure cycle. The breathing cycle does the opposite. A lower floor and a wider gap reduce background anxiety. You think more clearly, you make better decisions, you take smarter risks. The cycle builds itself. So, here's the honest question. Which cycle are you actually in right now? Not which one you want to be in. Which one does your real monthly floor number put you in today? Because the answer to that question determines almost everything about where you'll be financially 5 years from now. Remember the two people from the beginning? Third floor, sixth floor. Same income, similar savings. Here's what we understand now that we didn't at the start. She isn't sleeping well because she's rigid or joyless. She's sleeping well because her gap is wide, her floor is manageable, and her sense of who she is doesn't depend on what her apartment looks like or what she drives. He isn't struggling because he's careless or bad with money. He's struggling because he walked into every single one of these traps without knowing they existed. The floor crept up without him noticing, and when things got tight, his identity wouldn't let him pull back. He's not a cautionary tale. He's just someone who was never shown the actual map. And that's really what this comes down to. Most people who feel financially stuck aren't doing anything dramatically wrong. They're just measuring the wrong number, watching the balance instead of watching the gap. So here's what I want you to do this week. Just one thing. Sit down and calculate your real monthly floor number. Not a rough guess, the actual number. Add up every single fixed cost your life requires every month just to keep running. Then divide your savings by that number. That's how many months of real security you actually have. That's your runway. Not the balance, the runway. Because here's the truth. Either you design your financial floor consciously, or your lifestyle designs it for you. And when your lifestyle designs it, it almost always designs it a little too high, a little too tight, a little too close to the edge. The person sleeping well on the third floor didn't get there by accident. She got there by seeing clearly what most people never stop to look at. You can do exactly the same thing. Thanks for watching. Subscribe if this helped, and I'll see you in the next one.